Hello everyone, hello gamers, and hello Bitcoiners. Here we have in our fourth season of the Light Nite show, Light Nite sessions. So it's a pleasure to have you today here, Adam.
Hi, yeah, thanks for having me on.
And today we'll be talking a little bit about Bitcoin, cryptography, satellites, and next future applications that can be done in Liquid. So with all this said, let's go straight to the point. So the first question that I've been researching and I have is what's the story behind the Netscape hack? How was the actual motivation behind that? So it was kind of a cypherpunk spirit that you and Hal proposed, or it was kind of more like a proof of work. I never better say it, that like a proof of work of an ethical hacker.
Yeah, so it was related to, so let's see, I guess that we could start with the motivation for why this. There was some regulation in some countries where the governments and the establishment didn't like encryption. So, the internet changes the balance of power a bit, so the individuals have more control, and the introduction of encryption like PGP allowed people to communicate in a way that was private, and the governments really had no chance to decrypt. And some of them didn't like it, particularly more like less democratic countries or countries with poor human rights records tended to be more aggressive in wanting to ban encryption and that kind of thing. But there was a while where the US also had an anti-encryption kind of rule, and the way it worked in their case, France also had one, so they weren't alone by any means in terms of democratic countries. But they, you could, as a US software developer, a company, you were not allowed to export. So they used export regulations, which were mostly designed for military hardware, like tanks and heavy guns and things like that. So it's kind of odd.
And military stuff.
Yeah. So it was the same set of regulations, but they added encryption technologies to this set of regulations, even software developed openly. So, and so what they allowed was you could export weakened encryption that would be easy to break. So like 40 bits, which is brute forceable with some effort. And so, the Netscape browser is a well-known example of some widely used internet software with this weakened encryption. So there were two versions, one for use only in the US, and you weren't supposed to export it, which had a normal encryption strength of 128 bits or something like that, depending on the algorithm, and the export version, which was 40 bits. And so, people on the cypherpunks list weren't very happy about this because, it's not useful, it's not strong encryption, and anybody can break it, and it would mean that you wouldn't have real privacy, and maybe it would put companies and individuals at risk. And so we figured, well, that's so weak, even we can break it. So we had to go at breaking it. So we wrote some software to distribute the work, and a bunch of people with computers and lots of CPUs or at work or at home or at universities and things like that participated. And it was a bit like SETI at home, but it was a simple protocol for sending you chunks of work to try and decrypt it. And sure enough, within, the story's online, but within not too many days, it was broken. And somebody...
That has to be exciting, right? I mean, it kind of like a Cold War. You were in your house, or you were in just your Pacific area, but it was actually a cryptography war behind that.
Yeah, right. So if I recall, Hal Finney had proposed a challenge so that there was something to decrypt, right? Because we needed something to decrypt. So then we went ahead and did it, and it was found. So that was cool, and it made some news, and it drew some attention to the problem that because people who were arguing for government would say, oh, 40 bits is lots, all you need. And we showed that, no, really it's not. We can do this as a hobby and break this, so it's really not secure enough for anybody. So that was a story there. It was a lot of fun, and it showed that 40 bits isn't that secure. And at a later point, the EFF did a bigger one. They made some hardware to break, so that was 40 bits RC4, and there was another standard called DES, the encryption standard, and that one had a bigger key, 56 bits. So it wasn't so easy to break that in software at the time. So, but people figured that it wouldn't cost that much to make an ASIC, as is common in the Bitcoin space. So the EFF raised a bit of money and built an ASIC and built a DES cracker, and actually within a period of a few weeks broke a 56-bit DES key. Yeah, not so long. I mean, you'd have to look up the specifics online, but there's some information on the EFF. I mean, the EFF is a kind of electronic rights foundation, Electronic Frontier Foundation. So I'm not sure where they got the money from, whether somebody donated it, and people donated their expertise to design and build this at cost. So that was pretty cool too. So it started a kind of trend to prove things empirically. Like, you say it's secure, well, watch us prove that it's actually not secure.
Wow, very, very, very interesting. I actually, it's exciting, that story, because the way it was a revolution for the cryptography.
Yeah, I mean, it did eventually result. I mean, we don't know what went on behind the scenes, but eventually they did remove these restrictions largely. So nowadays you can use encryption software and export it in open source from the US and other countries. And it was actually like a business problem for American software developers at the time, because people wouldn't trust their software because they knew it had weak keys. And so there were European and there's people in Argentina, people in different countries doing cryptographic library development. In Australia, there was some OpenSSL library was developed outside the US, in Australia, for example, originally. So they were able to, it didn't really prevent availability of encryption as such. It just meant that the jobs went into other countries. So it wasn't good for the US software industry either. But it did get fixed, got overturned, so that was good.
Yeah, very impressive. So from that point, I like to do a switch in time and move on to the actual hashcash. And within this topic, I like to go ahead to the point of, I don't know, what's the actual motivation behind that? I mean, but not the technical one, the actual inspiration that brings you to develop the actual proof of work that then is implemented in many applications. So where does it come from?
So I mean, the cypherpunks were interested in privacy technology, and so I was actually operating a remailer, so a way to send email with privacy, so that the recipient couldn't see who the sender was. And you could also post onto Usenet newsgroups, which is a popular at the time, still exists, but it was more popular back then, kind of internet discussion forums. There were thousands of discussion forums. And what was happening was that people were spamming through the remailer, particularly for the Usenet groups. And it wasn't like commercial spam where they were selling something. They were just sending random numbers. And we think they were doing it to annoy the system administrators of the Usenet servers. And Usenet itself is decentralized, but each Usenet server has a system administrator, let's say a university or an ISP. And if somebody was clogging up their servers, they would notice and get annoyed and maybe try to do something about it. So we think the people doing the spamming were anti-privacy and wanted to, annoy the operators so that they would create some backlash against remailers. And so that got me to thinking about, well, what could you do about that? And because most anti-spam technology at the time was about blocking, there was a lot of spam going on. So it was an arms race for ISPs. Anybody who was a mail administrator had to deal with it. And it was the typical way that people were dealing with spam was not very effective and had side effects and was privacy invasive. So they would basically blacklist the mail servers or the domains or the sender's email address and things like that. And actually, even today, there are some standards like DKIM, which adds a digital signature to your email, even if you don't know it. And so it's potentially dangerous because, you just send a casual email to somebody and maybe that gets into some legal dispute years later and there's a digital signature on it to prove you sent it and you had no idea, right? And it's just a side effect from spam. So, in this case, because it was for anonymous communication, there's no way that you could, firstly, blocking people is not very, I didn't like it philosophically, but also it's not possible because the sender is private. And I thought that email was trending in a bad direction because the way that people were talking back then was about internet driver's licenses, sort of adding identity and approval and permission to even connect to the internet and attach your identity to all your communications. And so, to my point of view, email was intentionally sender anonymous, and it should stay that way. And this trend of adding identity was pushing it in the wrong direction. So anyway, to combat it, it made me think that, to think again about, well, there's no identities, but what is the actual problem here? The problem isn't that the person's identified or not. The problem is that email is free, so there's no, very close to free, so there's no cost. So then I was thinking about, well, how can you create a cost? And there wasn't PayPal then, but there were credit card merchant processors, but they were kind of difficult to get and very hard for an individual, and a lot of work for a company, and quite expensive. Like the minimum payment you could make was quite high. So there wasn't really much in the way of micropayments, and the micropayments even today are not very scalable, so that you would use them on an email, for example. So, and I was also looking at, coincidentally, some discussion about birthday collisions, which is a type of hash collision where you try to find two hashes with the same output, and you can do that in less work than you expect. So the name comes from the surprising effect that if you take a room with a party and you ask, well, how many people have to be present until there's 50-50 chance that two people are born on the same day, and you think, well, there's like 365 days in a year, but actually it only takes 23 people because you have to approximately square root until you get, by chance, two people with the same birthday. And the same applies to hash functions. And so you can have, like a 128-bit hash function or 160 or 256-bit, and the amount of work to break it will be the square root of it. So the 128 one will be 64 bits, which is a lot of work, but still achievable, with some ASICs or something. So I was thinking, well, it's quite an interesting fact that if somebody did this enormous amount of work and broke it, anybody could verify their work immediately. You just, hash the two numbers and see that they're equal, and you would have a proof of this enormous work that's very easy to verify, but very hard to create. And so those two topics I was looking at became related in my mind. So I was thinking, well, the fact that you can get this verifiable work, that's useful, but this particular work is not useful because it's too hard, and it could be used to impose a cost on sending mail. So then I tried to find ways to modify this birthday collision, like to create a different kind of collision that you could reduce the work and still verify efficiently. And so that's where this kind of partial hash collision came from, that you could actually reduce the work a lot, as much as you wanted. So the original stamp was like 20 leading zeros in binary, so it would take about 1 million tries. And so, on a typical desktop or laptop at the time, this was in 97, so probably like a 386 or something, it would take a minute or something.
That was back then when being an email administrator was an essential role. So that was a long time ago. Yeah.
People were pretty, there were conferences about combating spam. People were unsure what to even do about it. It was an arms race, and the good guys were losing, the spammers were winning. So people were interested for any solution. So the Hashcash topic, when it was published at the time, it a lot of people became aware of it because they were curious for any solution to spam, and it's quite a novel, curious thing that is counterintuitive. That this is possible. You can have this short string, and it proves to anybody. And the way it was working as well is kind of like a postage stamp. So you don't want people to be able to reuse the stamps. So the collision would involve something, and what I used was the email address and the time of sending. So that would mean that the stamp, if somebody sent you a mail with a stamp, they couldn't reuse the same stamp for myself because I would check it and see that it's the wrong address. So it wasn't reusable, but it was a proof of work. And so, yeah, I mean, that started, there were previous proofs of work actually by Dwork and Naor, which predated Hashcash, but I think a lot of people weren't aware of that Dwork and Naor paper. And so Hashcash actually started quite a lot of discussion on the cypherpunks list about whether it could be used to build an electronic cash system. And the previous electronic cash systems had tried to work with banks. So they tried to get a way to deposit cash into a bank account and then withdraw it in electronic cash format and redeposit it. So the idea Hashcash was released in March 1997, and by April 1997, there was some discussion where I'd suggested in a thread with Bob Hettinger, who's somebody interested in electronic cash, that you could avoid the problem with needing a banking relationship and a permission from a bank by using proof of work to mine the coins and then having some decentralized protocol for exchanging the coins. And there were after that lots of brainstorming and ideas, and by 1998, so a year later, there were two more concrete proposals by Waydai with B-Money and Nick Supper with BitGold, which were also using Hashcash proof of work.
That's very interesting, especially when at that moment it was implemented at a higher level, not only with Bitcoin mining validation and so on, but also actually in more client-side applications like blogs, websites, and so on. So it was very, very interesting.
Yeah. I mean, I think you see that effect sometimes when there's a new idea that comes along, people will look for areas to apply it. So it got used in a lot of different things. I mean, to deter click farming. So, where people try to game, so there's some kind of incentive to collect clicks for an advertising agent, online advertising. And then if they're unethical, maybe they pay users to click on things or write bots to click on things. So some people used it as a anti-click farm mechanism. Yeah. So your browser would be doing something. And like there were other applications, where you had to sort of pay a bigger postage stamp to create a pseudonym, like a handle for some protocol. So there are a few different things that people tried.
Very interesting. I didn't know the actual full picture. I mean the full scene as I just understood now, and I find it very, very interesting. Let's go to the next topic. Let's move on to the more philosophical topic of this talk, I would call it. Let's go to talk about satellites. So financial economies are space, and we see this is coming. I mean, Elon Musk vision for the next 10 years is going to Mars, colonize it, and so on. And this brings new concepts and new paradigms to solve. And I see that financial economies are space through the means of Bitcoin relays into satellites can bring a new shift on the paradigm. And I would like to know how you envision this. Two kind of visions. The first one for the mid-short term, and the next vision would be kind of the long actual colonizing Mars term.
Yeah, so I mean the short term is more about global access to Bitcoin. So, in some countries, the internet is more expensive relative to salaries. So you can see there are some maps with geolocations of Bitcoin nodes. And so, for example, Nigeria has like one node. We think we know who it is. It's like a developer who lives there, right? So, and that's because it's expensive. Even by what you or I might pay for internet, theirs costs more, and the average salaries are lower. So it's expensive. People do have internet, but it's going to be maybe 2.5G cell phone and not too much. So not that much bandwidth because it's expensive. So the satellite can help because it's broadcast. So it can send the bulk data to sync a full node without needing to use a lot of bandwidth. And then you can, to send a transaction is quite small, a few hundred bytes. So if people have low bandwidth that's expensive, they can then still participate in the Bitcoin network more fully using the satellite. And so that's a part of the picture. I mean, people are pretty excited about Bitcoin being global, and there are many people in the world who are underbanked, like several billion, who maybe don't have a bank account or have not very good banking services, or they wouldn't trust their banks locally, maybe. So I think it's interesting to build the infrastructure to have more global use of Bitcoin. So we thought we'd seed some of it by adding part of the infrastructure and then seeing other people build on that infrastructure and add other services. So for example, you see the GoTenor mesh network and LocaNet doing mesh networking things that can connect into the satellite and relay messages that come from the satellite, that kind of thing. And, so as well as, there are also bi-directional satellite technologies. So the current Blockstream satellite is not bi-directional, but we would be interested longer term to get that working as well. So that's, there are lots of interesting uses for the satellite. I think, even if you do have high-speed internet and you don't mind using some of it to keep a Bitcoin node synced, it does identify you as a Bitcoin user on the internet. And maybe that's not a good idea for your privacy, because ISPs log, and actually even companies doing taint tracing and analyzing the Bitcoin network can see IP addresses because it's peer-to-peer. The peer that you connect to will see your IP address. So the satellite is just broadcast, so nobody knows you're using it really. And you can use it using the accelerated hardware, or you can use a more basic version using the CPU of a laptop or something, and some software-defined radio USB dongle. It's a bit cheaper, and so you can have a trade-off of the convenience of accelerated hardware device that's specific to the satellite, or using this USB and software-defined radio approach. So I think even for people with strong, high-speed connectivity, it's good for privacy. And for businesses, it's good because the Bitcoin network depends on having a view of all the blocks being created. So if you get a network partition, you could actually end up accepting something as final that isn't final. So if you get, sometimes a country has an internet disconnect from an undersea cable failure, so you can get things like that. And also you can have like network attacks where people are trying to interrupt your selectively deny service to you, sort of delete part of the traffic you're receiving, or hack an upstream router or something. So if you're operating a business like an exchange or something, it's useful to have redundant internet connections that are hard to identify for you. So I think it would be useful for exchanges and payment processors and so on to have the satellite feed as a sort of redundant connection to make sure they're on the real longest chain.
That's interesting. There is another question from the community that says that, can a satellite be used for mining, or latency is too high? I think I'm missing this question kind of, can we put a satellite that is fitted with solar panels and use that energy from the sun to validate, the Bitcoin network and blocks.
So, I mean, actually, today's satellites are just retransmitting, so they don't have much intelligence on the satellite. But it would certainly be possible to, to put a full node into a satellite, and there have been some proposals to do that kind of thing. The launch costs for actually miners are expensive. So, actually mining in space, unless, maybe in the far future, there's this concept of a Dyson sphere where you surround a star with solar panels, and you can actually extract an enormous amount of energy from a star, for example. But that's a kind of future civilization mode scientific thought experiment. But I think for the other kind of satellite mining, which could be interesting, and we have seen miners expressed interest in, there's a couple of things. So one is some of the mining sites are quite remote, so they have poor infrastructure. So, for example, there's some remote provinces in China that built hydro dams where there's not really any civilization nearby, and maybe the internet connection is not very good, or there's no internet connection. So there are a few places like that, and so you can mine using the satellite like that. You do have the latency. There is some latency because of the speed of light, round trip time to the satellite, but the power could be cheap at that location, and you don't have to send the full block. You can send something quite small, a few hundred bytes, just the counter and the information, or you can do it with a pool so that the pool is doing much of the work. So it's certainly possible and interesting because it means you have less reliance on infrastructure. And then the other thing you can do is, we've spoken to miners who have had internet connections fail at a mining farm, and they've been forced to run a whole mining farm on, a 3G cell phone dongle for a couple of weeks while they're waiting for the DSL to be repaired in some telephone line damage or something like that. So it happens. So having a second connection, even if it's a bit slower, is definitely worthwhile, because if you've got the power and you can't mine, you lose money very fast, because you're in a race to mine Bitcoin and create a profit above your equipment cost and your electrical cost. So downtime is very expensive. So having a redundant higher latency connection that won't be affected. All you need is power, right? So you're not affected by fiber connections and telephone lines and things like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And what about the actual long-term thoughts? So,
yeah,
do you envision the next societies, probably next generation or 2, 3 next generations, when they'll be colonizing other planets? I know that the current plans and motivation for the satellite was to serve the societies which have high elevated cost of internet service providers in Earth. But let's move beyond Earth. What do you think? Do you think that centralized fiat backed by banks will be used as a money system beyond the Earth, or something more secure and probably efficient will be used as an alternative?
Well, I guess in the Bitcoin space, where everybody's pretty excited to see a return to a kind of hard money and viewing Bitcoin as a modern replacement for gold, and going back to the gold money standard period before fractional reserve became widely used. So, and the other thing about, so already you see different monetary policies and taxation policies and views about lots of issues between governments in different countries. So, and having competing currencies is difficult because, one country doesn't want to use another country's money because they are, let's say, creating inflation to their advantage or something. So you could assume that if there's interplanetary economics, that a Mars colony would effectively be another country initially, and maybe grow from there. So it would be interesting to have a politically neutral, interchangeable money that is electronic and can be sent at a distance. And I guess the other question that people have already been discussing some years ago on a Bitcoin Talk forum is how could you mine between different planets in our solar system, given the speed of light latency. So we've already said that the speed of light just to a satellite orbiting the Earth is some hundreds of milliseconds. But once you're talking about the speed, the latency to Mars or something, it gets higher. And I think the answer is you can still do the mining. You just need to make some protocol adjustments to have slower blocks.
Yeah.
It's all about. I mean, the reason that the Bitcoin block interval is 10 minutes is considered to be because that keeps the orphan rate down when you have a natural race condition. And that race condition is basically, balancing. You want reasonably frequent blocks so that the user experience is reasonable for finality, but you want it to be slow enough that the block propagation time, how many fractions of a second it takes for everybody on the network to see a block, is reasonable as compared to that, so that you don't get too many accidental collisions where people both think they create a block. And of course, that's going to be much worse with the latency to Mars. So I think you would just look to increase the block latency or do some additional protocol to enable mining on both multiple locations with higher latency. And people have had fun thinking about how that might work. So there's a Bitcoin Talk thread on it going back a few years.
Let me stop you there for a moment. So what would happen in the hypothetical scenario where we have this system, the solar system full of planets running all of the Bitcoin network, placing some satellites as Bitcoin relays to connect between those planets? And what about if a natural disaster comes in, destroy, a bunch of satellites, and there is a natural hard fork there where both planets or an X number of planets are running one chain, and the other one are running another chain of the blocks? What will be the actual consequences of this effect in a economical aspect and in a technological aspect to be able to at some point readapt?
Yeah, I mean, I guess people would have to work around it temporarily because, presumably they know it happened. So it's a bit like the situation where just outside of Bitcoin, occasionally countries that are relying on a single fiber connection to the world, they'll have an undersea cable, and sometimes, rarely, but once in a while, somebody will cut a country off because they will, drag an anchor through the undersea cable and break it or damage it or something, and then they have to wait to repair, and the country is like kind of offline for a day or so. And usually there's some kind of less convenient connectivity, right? They can use a different network, or they can use bi-directional satellites or something else, or radio equipment. So I think you can get by with less convenient mechanisms, and it's happened, so you can sort of delay transactions or something like that. But yeah, it's a kind of interplanetary version of the island country getting disconnected from the internet. And if you look in the news, and across a few years, there will be one every other year or something that somebody did something by accident and just disconnected the country.
Interesting. What a science fiction scenario that we never know. That maybe that science fiction.
Elon Musk seems to be going for it, right? So maybe we'll get to some Mars colonization or a moon base soon enough. And we saw some Bitcoin transaction with one of the astronauts recently as well. It was a kind of demo that we did using the green wallet. I wasn't on the satellite, but it's certainly possible to do these kinds of things, and technology is moving quite quickly. It seems like, both in the Bitcoin protocol sense, but in the privatization of space development as well.
Interesting. Absolutely. I mean, I foresee this kind of like less science fiction now with Elon Musk in place and his plans for the long term than without him, of course.
Yep.
So yeah, let's go ahead now with the last topic before actually jumping into Light Nite and having a game together. And this topic is hot actually, because we've been seeing in other kind of communities, people are driving mad with the DeFi. So what's going on with DeFi in your opinion? And then let's switch the conversation more to liquid properties to now enable DeFi and so on.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the DeFi concept has been around for a while. And so there are obviously a couple of different ways to build things. So basically the interest started from people being interested to use Bitcoin as collateral for loans. I think that direction is more common than using dollars as collateral to borrow Bitcoin. And the reason to do that is, I think, often taxation. So it's, if you had some early coins or coins with a low cost basis, because Bitcoin prices changed so dramatically over the years, that if you sell it, then you create a capital gain. And in some countries, the capital gains taxes are quite high, or the tax rates are different depending on how long you held the coins. And so it can be, and yet somebody needs some money to, I don't know, buy a car or put a deposit on a house or something like that. And so it can make sense to borrow using Bitcoin as collateral. And then so there are companies that started to provide that, like BlockFi and Ledn and so on. And some of the exchanges let you do it as well, more for trading leverage. You can deposit Bitcoin and borrow dollars and then use the dollars to buy more Bitcoin. And there are also perpetual futures, which are the same kind of thing. You use Bitcoin as collateral, and then you're kind of implicitly buying Bitcoin, using Bitcoin, and there's an interest rate sort of hidden in between there. So there are multiple exchanges with these kind of facilities. Now, Bitcoin is a pretty interesting and good collateral because it's bearer and verifiable, and if you have it, you have it, right? So, if somebody offers you collateral, like, well, I'll borrow, and you can take my car if I don't pay the loan. Well, they could do it twice, and how do you know? Is there a central register of who owns cars? Sometimes there isn't. Even with houses where there are more centralized registers, sometimes people commit different kind of mortgage fraud and succeed in getting multiple loans on the same house and things like that. So Bitcoin is very good collateral, actually, because it's sort of bearer and verifiable that you have it if you've taken custody of it, or multi-sig custody of it as part of a loan arrangement. So it's good. And then because Bitcoin is decentralized, people thought, well, can you do decentralized finance? Can you do I really need to have a middleman? Can I just borrow from the other party? If the dollars are in a crypto format, maybe two people can do a trustless escrow, or even just a two-party protocol to borrow, where if the loan repayment, if the interest and repayment terms aren't met, there's a smart contract that becomes due where the other party can take it. And so that's something that becomes possible. So Dmitry Petrikov made a way to do this using liquid smart contracts. So using the covenant feature, he has like a loan repayment schedule. You could use it using Bitcoin as a collateral and Tether as the payment, but it would work for any asset. That's just an example of what you might use. And so it has a whole bunch of terms, and you could change the parameters, but basically it has an interest rate, a repayment schedule. You're allowed to miss one payment, and then there's a penalty payment. So it's got some quite elaborate rules that can be parameterized or disabled. And then there's no middleman.
That's interesting. So we're talking about the first DeFi application built on top of Liquid,
Yeah.
and it's using simplicity and the covenant feature to
No,
make.
actually, yeah. I mean, actually, this is just using the non-simplicity. So Liquid already has a basic covenant building block. So it's able to check a signature from the stack, which is an extra opcode that's not available in Bitcoin. And it's enough to build a covenant, a general covenant. And so he did some quite clever optimization and was able to make a general loan mechanism. So he has a video and some sample code, and people can have a look at it. So, and of course, simplicity is a more general language, so enables more of it. And so I think, like many things, people take ideas and elaborate them or do other things. And so, more recently in the last few months, there's been a lot of news and some, hilarity about things that are labeled as DeFi, but are really more kind of gamified airdrops where, somebody will start a secured loan, and if you take the secured loan, they'll airdrop you some coins that are labeled as governance coins, or there's some kind of story around them. And then, then they get busy marketing it, and they get a silly price on the coins, and then people take loans at 100% interest rate that they don't actually need to get the coins because they can sell the coins for more than 100% gain. And then they get, these are done on less secure blockchains, so they get hacked, or somebody steals the collateral, or I don't know. This is like a whole series of them in a very compressed period of time. Some of them didn't last more than a day before, between launch and failure, or relaunched or exit scam. So it's been a very colorful month, I guess, with these things. Unfortunately, they kind of give DeFi a bad name because DeFi is a perfectly sensible concept, but they have kind of made it into sort of a high yield investment product, which is a general term for sort of pyramid scam kind of behavior where, general common sense will tell you if somebody's offering 100% interest, there's something wrong with this story because that doesn't make sense, right?
Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, that's common sense, as you say. It's common sense. I agree. More things to talk about. So yeah, Liquid. We kind of 2 months ago implemented the first Liquid assets as NFTs in Light Nite, and we create this Light Nite Explorer where users can track and can trace these game artifacts. So it's more visible and is linked to the actual Liquid Explorer, where users can finally use cryptographic proofs to verify that the supply is limited, cannot be more reused, and the transaction details of the issuance, as well as the emissor of the token, the entity, the domain. Those are interesting topics, concepts for users that they care about privacy. Gamers, I think they are in the middle of becoming privacy, as well as any other community, as respecting the privacy more. But what do you think? What's your opinion about these Light Nite NFTs, these tokens, and what are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think it's pretty cool because typically, historically, many multiplayer games have discouraged economic activity outside the game, where one user could gift an artifact to another user or sell the artifacts. So the game's artifacts were largely entries in the database, and the game company would even try to discourage transfer. So I think that has proven to be difficult to enforce, and so users try to find ways around it, and usually they can. But this is a different approach where you just say, well, this is a digital object and the user owns it, and even more, you help them, so you make it so that they can withdraw the game artifact from the game and store it in a cryptocurrency wallet, like Green or Aqua, and they can also look at it in the Explorer. So I thought the Light Nite Explorer was pretty cool because it's showing you the NFT game artifacts visually as well, right? So you can see that you're looking at, a jet-powered skateboard or whatever, the artifact is. So there's a kind of, specific to the game visualization, and then you can click through to the actual transaction that received it and sort of augment it with game information. And I mean, I think the interesting thing for the end user is that they can then have a more concrete and external to the game use, so they can just send a games artifact to their friend, like in the same way that they would send, a small Bitcoin payment. You can transfer it, scan a QR code, send it, or paste an address and send it. And using some of the trustless mechanisms, they could do a trustless swap. So somebody could buy an artifact from them OTC, like peer-to-peer, without the usual issue that some people who've traded games tokens face, which is the person they're trading with might take their money and not give them the games artifacts, right? So, for example, the liquid swap tool can prevent that. And because they are normal liquid assets, an exchange could list them, or somebody could run a game-specific exchange to trade these trustlessly or using the exchange as a trusted party. So I think it's pretty cool, and we'll see if that becomes, a new model for games. So there's also the Infinite Fleet game that Samson Mo, who's Blockstream's chief strategy officer, is involved with. So that's another kind of NFT use case, like similar but different type of game. So we'll see if this takes off. It's pretty interesting kind of development, because sort of for users, they can take something out of the game and bring it into the real world, maybe use it as a discount token or use it to buy something even, right? So it brings the game's artifacts outside of the game and lets them have more control and do custom or ad hoc things with them. So, users or third-party developers might even build services or things using the game artifacts. So I think it's good that there's experimentation. Things that are controlled by a central company, you can only do what the company chooses to do. But once you let an enthusiastic user community do something, they can find interesting things.
Absolutely. Yeah, especially with these new technology tools that they allow you to create those assets, those liquid tokens, more interoperable between services, not only exchange, can be other games or any kind of other third-party community marketplaces without the necessity to be centralized official, and working in the same way, very, very straightforward with the same standard to make it secure.
Yep.
Let me actually showcase that, because I think it's very interesting and most people doesn't realize the potential of this. And let me share my screen with my account of Light Nite, and let me withdraw a skin to the actual Aqua wallet. So that's a new thing that was built by Blockstream, and let you explain about Aqua. So while I share the screen.
Yeah. So I mean, there are currently two liquid wallets before Aqua, which was the Elements wallet, which is similar to Bitcoin QT user experience, and the Green wallet, which is started life as a general Bitcoin wallet. And we developed Aqua as a simpler to use single sig wallet for Liquid and Bitcoin. So it simplifies the user experience and also supports the general Liquid assets, including the games tokens that we're going to look at here, I guess. So that'll be interesting to see that working.
Yeah. So those are my assets, and I like. I mean, I have the actual physical Blockstream Spy cap. I like it a lot. I have it with me here. Actually, I could wear it. But let's actually do the showcase with that. So I have here the list of Aqua application, and I'm gonna choose that one that says Blockstream cap. I don't know if you can guys see.
Yeah, I can see it.
So basically, I'm gonna select that asset, click on receive, and I'm gonna copy the actual wallet from here. So I'm gonna copy that address, and I'm gonna go now to here. Well, I can actually inspect this and actually take it from the Explorer if I want to have more information about the cryptographic proofs involved in the liquid issuance process. But let's go straight to actually go and withdraw this token. So yeah, basically you say that I've read the information that if I have a mistake placing the liquid address, it will go to different address, and hence I'll be responsible for my keys and my address. So I'm gonna paste here the address, and I'm gonna now confirm the withdrawal. So now this is here, and actually got an actual transaction ID that as soon as it's straight to the mempool, I can check it out. And actually, I have already received it in my Aqua wallet, so that's pretty cool. So I have here the Blockstream 1BBLCA, which is the ticker for the Blockstream cap. And basically, as soon as this process was done, you can check as well in the actual Explorer that I also have the actual tech transaction ID, and that's pretty cool as well to have that verification there. So I like that too.
Very cool.
So those are the details of the transaction here.
Yeah, so actually it was pretty fast as well, but I guess the other interesting thing for the technical audience is that it looks like it's a confidential transaction too. So people who are looking at the blockchain can't see that was a cap, or for all they know, it could have been a tether or a part of a Bitcoin or a different artifact. So they don't really know what people are trading. But nevertheless, the full nodes are enforcing the rules.
But this kind of brings like very crazy behavior between, if the game really sparks and it really kicks off, it can bring a very cool, interesting DeFi concept with the liquid swap tool, because you can actually, the more scarce those skins become and the more attractive, the more liquidity pools can generate around those attractive elements, attractor NFTs or liquid assets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's very cool. We'll see, and it's possible for third-party developers to do something creative with them too, because it's all based on open protocol, open source. So they can take some open source code for the liquid swap tool, for example, modify it, make it into a smartphone app or a web page or something, and do some interesting things with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. So let's go now for the most visual gaming related part of the show. So let's go ahead, play some Light Nite. I'm not sure if you've seen the actual gameplay, how the game currently looks and so on, but let's do it. Let's go ahead. I'm gonna share the screen right now. So yeah, so that's the one. So this is the actual game, the way it looks when you actually download the game and you turn it on, and that's the screen you receive after you log in. So let's equip some items here. So this is a cool one, new addition. Shout out to Vivek. If you're watching this is the actual Blockstream Collateral that we made here. It comes by default with the Blockstream cap, which in my opinion is pretty cool. And yeah, I like to play with this actually. So, but let me actually bring some cool things to this asset. Just as a reminder that people that are watching this, all of these skins here, they are assets on top of Liquid Network, which means you can be the owner of this if you withdraw to your Aqua wallet. So let me wear some protection, something cool, in case something happens. And let's actually bring a cool backpack. Well, actually Strike pack, which is the backpack from Strike. And it's very customizable, everything. You can custom as you want. And yeah, this looks cool. And something else, like, yeah, just in case it gets thirsty, let's bring a canteen over there. So it's cool. Cool. So let's go and play. We have a few modes here, Adam. So let me give you a walkthrough. So this is a kind of a development sandbox, which is, different gameplay systems, abilities, and experimental features within the actual game mechanic design. Then we have a military base, which is a training map. So you have to hit the boxes, and you can practice your aim, and you can practice your tactic gameplay. So when the actual multiplayer comes in, during this November, we will have, you can practice. And this is the COVID-19 survival mode. We made a mode where it is a virus and there are some virus particles. And this is a cool one because you can kill the virus, and by killing the virus in a lifetime limit, you can get to receive skins, and you can receive liquid assets. You can receive skins and satoshis. Sorry. So you have both. You have rewards for playing this game, and you receive Bitcoin and skins. Let's actually go and play this one. I mean, it's pretty difficult. It looks. I mean, I've been playing a little bit here, but it's not easy. You have these particles that as soon as you are shooting at them, it gets complicated. So it is sound, but the problem with the sound, if I put it, you may hear twice when I talk. But
yeah,
let me actually see if I can put some sound. Oh.
Yeah, that's working.
That's a cool Easter egg. So I want to emphasize. So what happened here, Adam? So do you have any remarks about this date?
So is this when something was posted about Bitcoin, I'm guessing?
Yeah, October 31st, 2018.
Cool.
So we have some Easter eggs in the game. Whoa, I died. It was complicated because I actually jumped into a virus section, and it's a mess because they are very heavy. And well, at least I made it not very bad. I actually made it to earn 500 sats, which is, I like that.
It's pretty cool that people can earn small amounts of sats as they play. Yeah.
Yeah, we're incentivizing the book reporting, so we can find books easily because they're incentivized to play. And if they have higher score, they can receive skins, so these liquid assets.
Mm-hmm.
Let me give you another walkthrough to the game, so I can show you some cool Easter eggs we are putting in the map. So this time I'll choose a different one. So this is a cool one. This is a Bitcoin runner. We also have Huddle Note here. We've been playing many times with him. But I'd probably choose the Bitcoin runner with the Blockstream spike hat, which is called. And yeah, probably a gun in the back. Well, yeah. Let's go and let's play this one. So yeah, in this mode, there is no enemies to kill. It's just basically for practicing your aim and find the actual Easter eggs in the game. So there are some Lightning Network stickers all around the place as well. And there are some paints here, like, Satoshi was here, so they made it. So he made it here to the actual map. Some crypto human lab with a kind of a Rick and Morty pistol here for everyone that is Rick and Morty fans. We have this teleport gun over here, which is pretty cool. And yeah, some Bitcoin posters all around the map. There are things here like Satoshi poster over there. A guide with the Light Nite Explorer and the Light Nite cool things there. And yeah, the map is kind of bigger right now. So every time new sections of the map are being expanded, and this brings opportunities to have more Easter eggs in place. I'm gonna show you one thing that is cool that we want to implement as well, like game design mechanics to find and to have a more gaming immersive experience. So this is a cave where we want to put some of kind of like a treasure map here, where you can go and find the locations within the map, find different maps, different pieces of the puzzle, and solve the equation to have access to in-game rewards, more Bitcoin or more skins that you can, extract from the game design. And this is it. Basically, currently you have this virus system where you can kill. You also have other elements of the game that you can have, like these icons and these Easter eggs where you can find. And by this month, actually, we are releasing the multiplayer where we are connecting other gamers to play as a PvP model. So you can kill your enemies with your friends, and you can have squads playing against each other and so on. So that's kind of what we are bringing to the game. And
does that also result in Satoshi's changing hand? Like if you played a friend, does the winner take some Satoshis?
So no, that's more for incentivization of back reporting and doing some marketing perspective.
Got it.
But we have a game mode where it actually involves that. So it's a competitive esports model where we want to embed that reward element, behavior, I would call it, because you can jump into a competitive match, and prior to that matchmaking process, you select your skins, your NFTs you want to get into the game. And once you are paired with other enemies of the group, you are in the island where you have to kill the other enemies, or if it's a squad based, you and your squad have to kill the other enemies, and there is only one squad standing at the end of the match. Now, this game mode is interesting because the matchmaking process pairs you with the users or group of users that they bring the skins of the same quality and hence price policy, and with the same rank. And what happens is that if you die on this mode, your skins stay in the game, on the virtual floor of the game. And if any other user goes and can grab this loot from the floor and put into their backpacks, and if they make it to win, those assets are not in the multi-sig wallet anymore, so they are now in their account, and then he won those skins that then he can sell it in the market or any other kind of third-party market or any other type of exchange in return of Satoshis or any other asset, and liquidate these new benefits of playing. So we are incentivizing more the esports model.
Very cool.
And that's basically how you do it.
Yeah, so it's real-time Satoshis in the game using Lightning as well?
Yeah, using Lightning Network as well with the skins. So, before using Aqua wallet, it was kind of more, it was a learning curve, and it was some friction to acquire some liquid Bitcoin in order to pay the fees. So that's why we implemented Lightning Network as a middleman exchange, just basically to pay ourselves those liquid Bitcoin fees for the transaction cost. But now that is way more easier with the Aqua wallet, is something that we may as well bring as an option to have those balances, the liquid Bitcoins for skin transferences, as well as the Lightning Network payments for rewards.
Cool. Yeah.
And that's basically it. So as a remarks, let's see if there's anyone else from the community asking questions. Before closing this show, that we are ahead of an hour, let's do some 10 minutes, 15 minutes of Q&A. So everyone is so welcome to ask any questions for the actual game, the Light Nite skins, architecture, for Adam back history and Blockstream questions that can be for him. Feel free to type those questions, and we'll stand them out here in here. So someone is asking, Adam is asking if that's the best ad protection for damage. it will eventually when there will be PvP. So this is kind of your shield that you can bring. So you have a generic shield that is not very fancy, and then you can customize your shield. So those are skins that you can customize, and they are liquid assets. What about issuing securities in liquid? That's a very nice question. We should have actually talked about that.
Yeah, I mean, it's the same technology for the NFTs that people can issue actually securities. So there's another mode for liquid which has policies that the issuer can choose to implement, and so then it could be used as a platform for issuing shares in a company or something like that, or other kinds of assets. It's a general sort of programming mechanism. So people have actually used the policy for surprising things. So you might have seen in the news that Barbados implemented a kind of COVID government payments using the securities. We're actually renaming the feature to Blockstream to a different name, because not everything that is being used with it is actually a security. And if you're not doing something with security, maybe you don't want to mislabel it as security. But in any case, they used the same mechanism to make a government payment in Bahamian dollars with some restrictions about where you can spend it. So it's something that you better see online. And this is in Bermuda.
Nice. I think.
But yeah, the same mechanism can be used for shares or bonds or other kinds of investment, like a real estate investment or what have you. And the policy can be used for, the one in Bermuda is about where you can spend it, but a more typical policy might be, let's say a security is available in some countries or to some types of investors or things like that. So that's handled outside of the system. All that Liquid sees as a multi-sig from the where the policy is implemented as a multi-sig.
That's another interesting question there for Light Nite. So yeah, the thing that we have in mind is, currently all of the skin designs they are implemented by us directly, and the thing we are doing with that is that we want to open a marketplace where you can put together designers, and not only Light Nite but as well other games that they interact with our technology. So the thing is to bring those designers to create custom skins and models that they fit perfect game designs from other games that they are powering with the technology based on Liquid that we are offering to game developers and publishers. And then on this marketplace, you can have customized limited edition of skins that some designers are putting together. Community from that game are voting based on rank. They're implemented in different games. And that's how we are open modding the actual skin market to not use centralize it in one specific game, and that's why that's the thing. So answering to the question, yeah. And the character bond rig is currently we haven't made it available yet, especially because we plan to release this feature where we want to make this crowdsourcing designer platform for skins in kind of third quarter, second quarter of next year, roughly. Based on the roadmap current details, and if there is no other delays or further delays, we will be able to release the character bond rig, documentation, and everything by then. So at the moment, there is one place where you can go and request skins, which is issues.lightnite.io, where we can that's where our community is contributing. So you can say, hey, I want a custom skin request. I want a skin of this type with this logo and these characteristics. And I want it to be like this, like that, and with that, and you choose your aesthetics aspects of the skin. And people from the community, gamers and other contributors and other members of our community, they are voting those requests. And if that's a request that most people tend to like it and they like your suggestion, we implement it straightforward on next releases. Yeah, so yeah, I think that's pretty much it. I'm gonna go in now for the closing remarks. Yeah, I'll post the URL here. So going for the closing remarks, it's been a pleasure to have you here, Adam. And I'm very much looking forward for trying out new Liquid features after this discussion and conversation we had. So yeah.
Yeah, it looks like there's another question here about oracles. So, I mean, in effect, the policy server for securities is a kind of oracle because it will sign or co-sign if a policy is met, and a policy could actually be an oracle for something potentially. So that's the way we've been doing oracles, but there are more elaborate oracles one could build. So that'd be an interesting thing to see further development in.
Another one.
Yeah, we're working on Aqua for Android too. We just did iOS first. So it's designed to be the kind of easy to use single sig wallet for Liquid and Bitcoin. And Green is the more power user wallet. So Green has Tor support and hardware wallet support and more key management options like multi-sig and two-factor authentication. So we'll be, adding more power user features to Green and expanding Aqua to Android.
Is there any other question for Adam that anyone wants to ask? Just feel free to ask it before we close this session that is about to be finished.
Yeah, so I mean, overall, I think it's pretty interesting. Look forward to the official launch in a bit over a month, and to see what the community does with the externally transferable and programmable game assets. So it'll be interesting to see how this works.
Thank you. I think it's great that you find it interesting and looking very forward to make this happen and to get close for the actual launch date. Thank you, Adam. It's a honor and pleasure to have you here in this Light Nite session, and I hope you to have a good day the rest of the day.
Thank you. Thanks for having me on. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.